The sun had barely risen over London when William opened his eyes in his grand bedroom at Kensington Palace. Today was not just any ordinary day. Today his father would become King Charles, and everything in their family would change forever. William sat up in bed and looked around his room. The walls were covered with family photos and paintings that told the story of his life. But today felt different from all the other days he had woken up in this same room. He walked slowly to the large window and pulled back the heavy curtains. Outside, he could see people already gathering on the streets. Some had camping chairs and British flags. Others had brought their children who were still sleepy but excited. The sight made William feel both happy and nervous at the same time. These people had come from all over the country to see his father become king. They believed in his family and trusted them to lead the nation. William walked to his bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw not just a man but someone who would one day wear the crown himself. The thought made his hands shake a little. He had always known this day would come, but it felt so sudden now that it was actually here. His reflection stared back at him with eyes that looked just like his mother Diana. He wished she could be here to see this moment and to give him the courage he needed. In the next room, he could hear Catherine talking softly to their children. Her voice was calm and gentle like it always was when the children were worried or confused about something. George was asking questions about what would happen today. Charlotte wanted to know if she would have to sit still for a long time. Little Louis was probably more interested in his breakfast than anything else. The sound of his family made William smile despite his nerves. William opened his wardrobe and looked at the ceremonial uniform hanging there. It was deep blue with gold buttons and red trim. The jacket was heavy with medals and ribbons that told the story of his military service. Each piece had been pressed and cleaned until it sparkled. Palace staff had been preparing this outfit for weeks to make sure everything was perfect. He touched the fabric gently and felt the weight of tradition in his hands. As he began to get dressed, William thought about his father. Charles had waited his whole life for this moment. He had prepared for decades to become king, and now at 74 years old his time had finally come. William felt proud of his father, but also worried about him. Being king was not an easy job. It meant putting the country before your own wishes. It meant making difficult decisions that would affect millions of people. Catherine knocked gently on the door and came into the room. She was already dressed in a beautiful pale blue dress that matched William's uniform. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, but William knew she was much stronger and braver than any storybook character. She walked over to William and helped him with the difficult buttons on his jacket. Her fingers worked quickly and surely while she talked about the children and how excited they were. Catherine had a gift for making everything seem normal and manageable, even when the whole world was watching. She reminded William that today was about family and love, not just crowns and ceremonies. The palace was already buzzing with activity. Servants hurried through the hallways carrying flowers and polishing silver. Security guards checked and double-checked every room. The royal chefs were preparing a special breakfast that would give the family energy for the long day ahead. Everyone knew their job and did it with pride and precision. William finished getting ready and took one last look in the mirror. Today he would watch his father become king and take another step toward his own destiny. Prince George walked into his parents' bedroom wearing his small formal suit that made him look like a tiny gentleman. His hair was perfectly combed, but his face showed confusion and curiosity about everything happening around him. The 9-year-old had noticed that everyone in the palace was acting differently today. Servants were moving faster than usual and speaking in hushed voices. Even his nanny seemed more serious than normal. George approached his father, who was still adjusting his ceremonial uniform in front of the tall mirror. The little prince tugged gently at William's jacket to get his attention. His big brown eyes looked up at his father with the kind of innocent wonder that only children possess. George had been thinking about this day for weeks, but still did not fully understand why everyone seemed so nervous and excited at the same time. "Papa, why is everyone acting so strange today?" George asked in his soft voice. He had noticed that his mother had been checking and double-checking everything from his clothes to his hair. The palace staff kept bowing more than usual and using words like "Your Royal Highness" even more often than they normally did. George was smart for his age, but the weight of royal protocol was still something he was learning to understand. William knelt down to his son's level so they could talk eye to eye. He put his hands gently on George's shoulders and smiled in the warm way that always made his children feel safe and loved. "Today is very special," George William explained in simple words. "Your grandfather is going to become the King of England today. That means he will be the leader of our whole country and many other countries too." George's eyes grew wide with amazement. He had always known his grandfather was important, but becoming king sounded like something from the fairy tales his mother read to him at bedtime. "Does that mean Grandpa Charles will wear a big crown like the kings in my storybooks?" George asked with excitement creeping into his voice. The idea of seeing his grandfather in a real crown made the whole day seem much more interesting and magical. Just then Princess Charlotte came bouncing into the room wearing her pretty pink dress with white flowers embroidered on the sleeves. Her long brown hair was styled in perfect curls that bounced as she moved. Charlotte was 7 years old and full of energy and questions about everything she saw. She had been practicing her curtsy for weeks because their mother had told her it was important to show respect during the ceremony. "Mama, will there be lots and lots of people there?" Charlotte asked as she spun around to show off her dress. She had heard the grown-ups talking about thousands of people coming to watch the ceremony. The idea of so many people in one place was both exciting and a little scary for the young princess. Charlotte loved meeting new people, but she had never been around so many strangers at one time. Catherine was sitting on the edge of the bed helping little Prince Louis with his miniature formal outfit. The 4-year-old was more interested in playing with the shiny buttons on his jacket than listening to the serious conversations happening around him. Louis had the same mischievous smile as his father, and the same bright blue eyes that seemed to sparkle with humor even during the most formal occasions. "Why do I have to wear these uncomfortable shoes?" Louis asked as he tried to kick off his small black dress shoes. He much preferred his sneakers that let him run and jump and climb on the furniture. These fancy shoes felt stiff and made funny sounds when he walked across the marble floors of the palace. Louis did not understand why looking fancy was so important when being comfortable seemed much better. Catherine laughed softly at her youngest son's complaint. She picked him up and sat him on her lap, while she explained that sometimes we dress up in special clothes for special occasions. "Today is one of the most special days our family will ever have," she told him gently. "We want to look our very best to show respect for Grandpa Charles and for all the people who will be watching." William watched his wife handle their children's questions with such patience and grace. Catherine had a wonderful way of explaining complicated things in words that children could understand without making them feel worried or scared. The royal car moved through the streets of London like a slow-moving parade. William sat next to Catherine, while their 3 children pressed their faces against the windows with wonder and amazement. The car was specially made with thick glass that kept them safe, but still let them see everything happening outside. The interior was covered in soft cream-colored leather, and the seats were more comfortable than any furniture in their palace. Outside the car windows, London looked completely different than it did on any normal day. Every street was packed with people wearing red, white, and blue clothes. British flags hung from every window and lamppost. Some people had painted their faces with the colors of the flag. Others wore funny hats shaped like crowns or held signs with messages of love and support for the royal family. The sight was both beautiful and overwhelming. Prince George pointed excitedly at a group of children who were waving small flags and cheering as the royal car passed by. "Look, Papa, there are kids just like us," he said with excitement in his voice. George had never seen so many people in one place before. The crowd stretched as far as his eyes could see in every direction. Some people had been waiting since the early morning hours just to get a glimpse of the royal family on this historic day. Princess Charlotte was fascinated by all the colorful decorations that covered every building they passed. "Mama, why did everyone put up so many pretty things?" she asked, while pointing at the flowers and ribbons that decorated the shop windows. Catherine explained that when something very special happens, people like to celebrate by making everything look beautiful and festive. The whole city had transformed into a giant party in honor of the coronation. Little Prince Louis was more interested in the horses than anything else. He could see the mounted police officers riding alongside their car on beautiful black horses that stepped proudly through the streets. The horses wore special ceremonial gear with gold trim, and their riders wore bright red uniforms with tall black hats. Louis loved animals and thought the horses looked like they were dancing as they moved through the crowds. As they got closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowds became even thicker and more excited. People were cheering and singing songs that William remembered from his own childhood. Some were the same songs that had been sung when his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, was crowned many years ago. The continuity of tradition made William feel connected to all the kings and queens who had come before him. Catherine reached over and squeezed William's hand gently. She could see that he was feeling nervous and emotional about what was ahead. The weight of the day was starting to show on his face, despite his efforts to stay calm for the children. Catherine had learned to read her husband's moods perfectly after all their years together. She knew he was thinking about his mother Diana, and wishing she could be there to see this moment. The ancient towers of Westminster Abbey came into view, and the children gasped with amazement. The building was almost 1,000 years old and looked like something from a fairy tale with its tall pointed spires and beautiful stone carvings. Scaffolding and camera equipment surrounded the building as television crews from around the world prepared to broadcast the ceremony to millions of people. William looked at the abbey where he had been married to Catherine more than 10 years ago. That had been one of the happiest days of his life, and now he was returning for another moment that would change his family forever. The same bells that had rung for his wedding were now ringing to announce his father's coronation. The car slowed as they approached the entrance where hundreds of important guests were already arriving. William took a deep breath and prepared his family for the moment when they would step out of their private space and into the eyes of the world. The heavy wooden doors of Westminster Abbey opened with a deep creaking sound that seemed to echo through centuries of history. William stepped out of the car first and immediately felt the weight of tradition surrounding him like a warm blanket. The ancient stones beneath his feet had witnessed the coronations of kings and queens for nearly 1,000 years. Every step he took connected him to the long line of royalty who had walked this same path before him. Catherine emerged from the car looking absolutely radiant in her elegant blue dress. The morning sunlight caught the diamonds in her earrings, making them sparkle like tiny stars. She moved with the grace and confidence that had made her beloved by people around the world. Her smile was warm and genuine as she waved to the crowds of people who had gathered to witness this historic moment. The photographers captured every angle of her perfect appearance. Prince George walked beside his parents with remarkable composure for a 9-year-old boy. His small shoulders were straight, and his head was held high as he had been taught during their practice sessions at the palace. He looked around at the magnificent architecture with eyes full of wonder and curiosity. The Gothic arches and stained glass windows told stories of faith and monarchy that stretched back through the centuries. Princess Charlotte held her mother's hand tightly as they approached the abbey entrance. Her pink dress fluttered gently in the morning breeze, and her curls bounced with each step. Charlotte had practiced walking slowly and gracefully for weeks leading up to this day. She remembered her mother's instructions about keeping her back straight, and her smile bright for all the people who would be watching on television around the world. Little Prince Louis walked between his parents, looking around at everything with the innocent amazement that only a 4-year-old could possess. His eyes were wide as he took in the enormity of the building and the importance of the moment. The sound of church bells ringing filled the air around them, creating a magical atmosphere that made even the youngest prince understand that something very special was happening. As they entered the abbey, the temperature dropped several degrees, and their voices seemed to disappear into the vast stone interior. The ceiling stretched so high above them that it seemed to touch the sky itself. Hundreds of candles flickered throughout the space, creating dancing shadows on the ancient walls. The smell of old wood and burning wax filled their nostrils with the scent of centuries past. The nave of the abbey was filled with more than 2,000 guests who had come from every corner of the world to witness the coronation. Kings and queens from other countries sat next to prime ministers and presidents. Religious leaders from many different faiths had gathered together to show their respect for this ancient ceremony. The sight of so many important people in one place was both humbling and inspiring. William felt the presence of his late mother Diana as he walked down the aisle where she had once walked for her own wedding to his father. He could almost hear her gentle voice encouraging him to be brave and to remember that his family was loved by people everywhere. The memory of her smile gave him strength and helped calm the nervous energy that had been building inside him all morning. Catherine noticed how well the children were handling the pressure and attention. They walked with dignity and poise that made her heart swell with pride. She had worried that the formal atmosphere might overwhelm them, but they seemed to understand instinctively how to behave in this sacred space. Their natural grace was a testament to the careful preparation and loving guidance they had received. The organ music filled every corner of the abbey with sounds that seemed to come from heaven itself. The choir of Westminster Abbey had been practicing for months to ensure that every note was perfect. Their voices blended together in harmonies that had been sung in this same space for generations of royal ceremonies. The music created an atmosphere of reverence and celebration that touched the hearts of everyone present. As they reached their designated seats in the front of the abbey, William took one last look around at the incredible scene. In just a few minutes, his father would walk down this same aisle to receive the crown and become king. The weight of history and the promise of the future seemed to meet in this one perfect moment in time. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood at the altar, holding the Stedward's crown high above his head. The ancient crown was made of solid gold and decorated with precious stones that had been collected from around the world over many centuries. The weight of the crown was enormous, not just because of the gold and jewels, but because of all the history and responsibility it represented. Every person in the abbey held their breath as this sacred moment approached. Charles stood before the altar wearing the golden coronation robes that had been worn by kings for hundreds of years. His face showed both the nervousness of a man about to accept an enormous responsibility and the peace of someone who had prepared his whole life for this moment. At 74 years old, he had waited longer than any heir in British history to become king. His mother, Queen Elizabeth, had reigned for 70 years, and now it was finally his turn. William watched his father with a mixture of pride, love, and understanding that only a son could feel. He knew that Charles had sometimes struggled with the pressure and expectations of royal life. There had been difficult times when the family had been criticized in the newspapers and when personal problems had become public knowledge. But through all of those challenges, Charles had never stopped preparing himself to serve his country with dedication and honor. The moment the crown touched Charles' head, everything changed in ways both visible and invisible. Charles was no longer just a prince waiting for his turn to serve. He was now King Charles III, by the grace of God, King of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms. The transformation was instant and complete. Every person in the abbey and millions watching around the world witnessed the creation of a new monarch. Prince George watched with fascination as his grandfather became king right before his eyes. The 9-year-old had studied pictures of previous coronations in his history books, but seeing it happen in real life was completely different. The ceremony felt like magic mixed with the most serious moment he had ever experienced. George understood that one day he would stand in that same spot and receive that same crown. Princess Charlotte squeezed her mother's hand tightly as the crown was placed on her grandfather's head. She could feel the importance of the moment, even though she was too young to fully understand all of its meaning. The little princess had always loved her grandfather Charles, who told her funny stories and played games with her during family visits. Now he looked so different and important in his golden robes and shining crown. Little Prince Louis sat very still during the crowning ceremony, which surprised everyone who knew his usual energetic personality. Something about the solemnity of the moment seemed to calm even the most restless 4-year-old. He watched with wide eyes as his grandfather was transformed from the man who gave him piggyback rides into the King of England. The change was both wonderful and a little bit scary for the youngest prince. Catherine felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched her father-in-law accept the crown and all the responsibilities that came with it. She had grown to love and respect Charles during her years as part of the royal family. She knew how much he cared about the people of Britain and how seriously he took his duty to serve them. Catherine also understood that this moment meant her own husband was now one step closer to wearing that crown himself. The choir sang ancient hymns that had been sung at coronations for centuries. Their voices seemed to lift the ceremony beyond the earthly realm and into something divine and eternal. The music created a bridge between the past and the future, connecting this moment to all the coronations that had come before and all those that would come after. Every note carried the weight of tradition and the hope of continuity. William felt a profound shift in his own identity as he watched his father become king. He was no longer just the son of the future king, but the son of the actual king. His own path to the throne had shortened by one generation. The responsibility that he had always known would come to him someday suddenly felt much more real and immediate. He thought about his own children and how their lives would continue to change as they grew up in this royal destiny. The moment felt both incredibly long and impossibly short. William wanted to remember every detail of seeing his father crowned, but the ceremony seemed to pass in a blur of golden robes, singing voices, and flickering candlelight. When the Archbishop finally declared Charles to be the rightful king, the entire abbey erupted in cheers and applause that seemed to shake the ancient stones themselves. Prince George sat perfectly still in his chair throughout the entire 2-hour ceremony, without fidgeting or complaining even once. His 9-year-old body seemed to understand the importance of the moment and responded with a maturity that impressed every adult who witnessed his behavior. George kept his hands folded in his lap, and his eyes focused on the altar where his grandfather was being crowned. He had listened carefully to his parents' instructions about how to behave and followed them perfectly. The young prince occasionally whispered very quietly to his mother when he had questions about what was happening during the ceremony. Catherine would lean down and explain things in his ear using simple words that helped him understand the ancient rituals he was witnessing. George nodded seriously at each explanation, showing that he was not just sitting quietly, but actually paying attention and learning from this historic experience. Princess Charlotte demonstrated the perfect balance between childlike wonder and royal protocol throughout the long ceremony. Her 7-year-old mind was fascinated by all the beautiful colors and sounds surrounding her, but she never forgot the lessons about proper behavior that her mother had taught her. Charlotte sat with her back straight and her hands in her lap, just like she had practiced during their rehearsals at the palace. When the choir sang especially beautiful songs, Charlotte smiled with genuine joy that lit up her entire face. She loved music and had been taking piano lessons for 2 years. The grand organ and magnificent voices filling the abbey made her feel like she was inside the most beautiful song ever written. Her appreciation for the music was obvious to everyone who looked at her glowing expression. Little Prince Louis surprised everyone with his remarkably good behavior during such a long and formal ceremony. The 4-year-old, who was usually full of energy and mischief, sat quietly next to his mother for the entire 2 hours. He swung his legs occasionally under his chair, but never made noise or caused any distraction. His parents had worried most about how Louis would handle the pressure, but he proved that even very young children can rise to meet important occasions. Several times during the ceremony, Louis looked up at his mother with questions in his eyes. Catherine would smile reassuringly and sometimes put her finger gently to her lips to remind him to stay quiet. Louis understood the signal and would nod seriously before turning his attention back to the ceremony. His ability to follow directions and control his natural energy showed remarkable growth and maturity. The 3 children seemed to sense that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. They had been told that people all over the world were watching this ceremony on television, and that their behavior would be remembered for many years to come. Instead of feeling pressure from this knowledge, They seemed inspired to represent their family and their country with dignity and grace. Catherine watched her children with a heart full of pride and amazement. She had spent weeks preparing them for this day with practice sessions and conversations about royal protocol. But seeing them actually perform so beautifully under such intense scrutiny was more than she had dared to hope for. Their natural grace and good manners were evident to everyone who observed them throughout the ceremony. William glanced frequently at his children during the coronation and felt overwhelmed with love and admiration for how well they were handling everything. He remembered being their age and struggling to sit still during much shorter and less important events. The fact that all three of his children were behaving so perfectly during such a momentous occasion filled him with confidence about their ability to handle their royal duties as they grew older. The children understood without being told that this was not a time for playing or talking or moving around. Something in the atmosphere of the abbey and the seriousness of the adults around them communicated that this moment required their very best behavior. They responded to that expectation with a wisdom and maturity that seemed beyond their years. Television cameras captured many shots of the three young royals throughout the ceremony. Their composed expressions and perfect posture created images that would be treasured by the royal family and remembered by the public for generations to come. The children had no idea that their behavior was being watched and admired by millions of people around the world. As the ceremony neared its end, the children showed no signs of restlessness or fatigue despite the length of the event. They seemed energized by the importance of the moment and determined to see it through with the same grace they had shown from the beginning. Their remarkable behavior had added to the dignity and beauty of their grandfather's coronation in ways that no one could have predicted. The famous balcony of Buckingham Palace stretched out before the royal family like a stage where history had been made countless times before. William stepped onto the stone platform and immediately felt the weight of tradition beneath his feet. This same balcony had been used by his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, for more than 70 years to greet the British people after important occasions. Now it was his father's turn to stand here as the newly crowned king. The view from the balcony was absolutely breathtaking and almost overwhelming in its scope. The mall stretched out below them like a red carpet made of thousands and thousands of people. Every inch of space was filled with British citizens who had come to celebrate their new king. Red, white, and blue flags waved like ocean waves as far as the eye could see. The crowd extended all the way to Trafalgar Square and beyond, creating a sea of humanity that seemed to have no end. King Charles stepped forward first, wearing his crown and carrying himself with the dignity of his new position. The moment the crowd saw him, a roar of cheering erupted that was so loud it seemed to shake the palace itself. People threw their hats in the air and waved flags with such enthusiasm that the entire mall looked like it was dancing with joy. The love and support from the British people was overwhelming and beautiful to witness. Prince George walked carefully to the edge of the balcony and looked out at the massive crowd with eyes full of wonder and amazement. He had never seen so many people in one place, and the sight took his breath away. The 9-year-old waved shyly at first, but when he saw how excited the people became when he waved, he began to wave more confidently. The crowd seemed to love seeing the future king acknowledging them with his small hand. Princess Charlotte was absolutely delighted by the enthusiastic response from the crowd below. Her natural friendliness and joy shone through as she waved both hands at the people who were cheering for her family. The 7-year-old princess had always loved meeting new people, and this felt like meeting thousands of new friends all at once. Her bright smile and energetic waving made the crowd cheer even louder with appreciation. Little Prince Louis bounced slightly on his toes as he took in the incredible scene below them. The 4-year-old had never experienced anything like the noise and excitement of such a massive crowd. At first he seemed a little overwhelmed by all the sound and movement, but when he saw his siblings waving, he joined in enthusiastically. His small hand moved back and forth as he tried to wave to as many people as possible. Catherine stood behind her children, making sure they stayed safely away from the edge of the balcony, while still allowing them to see and be seen by the crowd. She helped position them so that the photographers could capture beautiful family moments that would be treasured for years to come. Her own waving was graceful and elegant as she acknowledged the warm reception from the British people. William felt his heart swell with emotion as he looked out at the incredible display of support and love from his fellow citizens. The crowd represented every part of British society, from young families with small children to elderly couples who remembered previous coronations. Some people had traveled hundreds of miles to be here for this historic moment. Their dedication and loyalty to the monarchy was both humbling and inspiring. The noise from the crowd was unlike anything the children had ever experienced. It was not just loud, but seemed to vibrate through their bodies and fill them with energy and excitement. The sound of hundreds of thousands of people cheering at the same time created a wall of noise that was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. But instead of being frightened, the children seemed energized by the enthusiastic response. Photographers from around the world captured every moment of the balcony appearance from multiple angles. The images of the royal family waving together would appear on newspaper front pages and magazine covers in dozens of countries. These photographs would become historic documents that showed the moment when Britain welcomed its new king and celebrated the continuation of the royal family. The Royal Air Force flew overhead in perfect formation, creating trails of red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky. The children looked up in amazement as the plane spelled out messages of congratulation in the clouds above them. The aerial display added another layer of pageantry and celebration to an already magnificent moment. As the family continued to wave and acknowledge the crowd, William realized that this balcony moment would be remembered as one of the most important in his family's history. The love and support shown by the British people gave him confidence that the monarchy would continue to serve an important role in bringing the country together during both celebrations and difficult times. The connection between the royal family and the people had never felt stronger or more meaningful. After hours of public ceremonies and formal appearances, the royal family finally retreated to the private quarters of Buckingham Palace, where they could relax and reflect on the extraordinary day they had just experienced. William loosened his ceremonial uniform and sat down in one of the comfortable armchairs that had been in the family for generations. The quiet of the private rooms felt almost strange after the noise and excitement of the crowds and ceremonies. Catherine helped the children out of their formal clothes and into more comfortable outfits that would allow them to move and play naturally again. Princess Charlotte was especially happy to get out of her fancy shoes, which had been pinching her feet during the long ceremony. Prince Louis immediately started running around the room, releasing all the energy he had kept controlled during the hours of sitting still and being on his best behavior. Prince George sat next to his father on the sofa and began asking questions about everything he had witnessed during the coronation ceremony. His 9-year-old mind was full of curiosity about the ancient traditions and symbols he had seen. "Why did Grandpa Charles have to hold that golden stick?" he asked, referring to the ceremonial scepter. William explained that each item used in the coronation had special meaning and represented different aspects of being a king. The young prince wanted to understand what would happen now that his grandfather was officially the king. Would everything change in their daily lives, he wondered. William assured him that while some things might be different, their family would always be the most important thing. They would continue to live together and love each other just as they always had. The crown and ceremonies were important, but family came first. Catherine sat with Princess Charlotte and little Prince Louis, answering their questions about the beautiful music and colorful decorations they had seen throughout the day. Charlotte was especially interested in the gorgeous dresses worn by the ladies at the ceremony. She wanted to know if she would get to wear such fancy clothes when she grew up. Catherine explained that royal ladies did get to wear beautiful gowns for special occasions, but that being kind and helpful was more important than wearing pretty clothes. Prince Louis was most excited about the horses and the airplane show he had seen during the day. He acted out the movements of the horses marching through the streets and made airplane noises as he remembered the Royal Air Force flying overhead. His 4-year-old imagination had been captured by all the pageantry and spectacle of the coronation celebration. The little prince asked if he could ride one of those big black horses someday. William looked around at his family gathered together in their private space and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this moment of peace and intimacy. After a day filled with the eyes of the world watching their every move, it felt wonderful to just be a normal family talking and laughing together. These quiet moments were just as important as the grand ceremonies in building the bonds that would carry them through the challenges ahead. King Charles joined them in the private sitting room, still wearing his crown, but looking much more relaxed than he had during the formal ceremonies. His grandchildren immediately ran to him, wanting to touch the crown and hear about how it felt to wear such an important and heavy piece of history. Charles laughed as he carefully removed the crown and let each child hold it for a moment under his careful supervision. The weight of the crown surprised all three children. Prince George could barely lift it with both hands and was amazed that his grandfather had worn it for hours without complaining. Princess Charlotte giggled as she pretended to wear the crown while sitting on her grandfather's lap. Prince Louis was more interested in looking at all the colorful jewels that decorated the golden surface. Catherine captured these precious family moments with her phone, knowing that these informal pictures would become treasured memories for years to come. The contrast between the formal ceremony photos and these relaxed family snapshots showed the dual nature of royal life. They were both a family and a symbol of national identity, and both roles were equally important. As the evening grew later, the children began to show signs of tiredness after their long and eventful day. William and Catherine started the process of getting them ready for bed, while they continued to chatter excitedly about everything they had experienced. The coronation had been a success beyond anyone's expectations, and the children had played their parts perfectly. Before going to sleep, each child had one more chance to talk privately with their parents about the day. These bedtime conversations allowed them to process their feelings and ask any final questions about what they had witnessed. William and Catherine wanted to make sure the children felt proud of their family and their country, but also understood that their most important job was to be good people who cared about others. As the children were finally tucked into their beds after the most extraordinary day of their young lives, William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The palace was quiet now, except for the distant sound of celebrations still continuing on the streets of London. People were so happy about the coronation that many had decided to keep the party going well into the night with street festivals and community gatherings. William felt a profound sense of accomplishment as he thought about how perfectly his family had handled such an important and challenging day. Each of his children had exceeded his expectations with their behavior and composure during the long ceremony. They had shown the world that the next generation of royals would be worthy of the trust and respect that the British people had placed in their family for centuries. Catherine smiled as she remembered the look of pure joy on Princess Charlotte's face when she waved to the crowds from the palace balcony. The 7-year-old had seemed to understand instinctively that the people below were celebrating not just the new king, but the entire royal family, including her. The connection between the princess and the public had been immediate and genuine, showing that she had inherited the natural warmth that would serve her well in royal duties. Prince George had demonstrated remarkable maturity and understanding throughout the entire day. His thoughtful questions and serious attention during the ceremony showed that he was already beginning to grasp the importance of his future role as king. William felt confident that his eldest son would grow into his responsibilities with wisdom and dedication. The 9-year-old had proven that he could handle pressure and expectation without losing his natural kindness and curiosity. Even little Prince Louis had surprised everyone with his ability to control his energetic personality when the situation required it. The 4-year-old had shown that royal training and family values were already taking root in his young mind. His natural charm and humor would undoubtedly make him a beloved member of the royal family as he grew older. The youngest prince had proven that age was not a barrier to understanding the importance of duty and service. The television coverage of the coronation had been watched by more than 2 billion people around the world, making it one of the most viewed events in history. News reporters from dozens of countries had praised the dignity and grace shown by William and his family throughout the day. The children in particular had won hearts across the globe with their perfect behavior and obvious love for their grandfather and their country. William realized that this day had marked a turning point for his own role within the monarchy. He was no longer just preparing to be king someday, but actively serving as the heir to a reigning monarch. His father, King Charles, would need his support and assistance in ways that had never been required before. The partnership between father and son would be crucial to the success of the new reign. Catherine reflected on how this experience had strengthened their family bonds and given them confidence about their ability to handle whatever challenges lay ahead. The children had proven that they could rise to meet important occasions with grace and dignity. Their successful performance during the coronation gave their parents hope that they would continue to grow into their royal roles with wisdom and compassion. The impact of the coronation extended far beyond just one day of ceremonies and celebrations. It had renewed the connection between the monarchy and the British people, showing that the institution remained relevant and beloved after more than 1,000 years. The enthusiasm and joy displayed by the crowds had demonstrated that the royal family continued to play an important role in bringing the nation together during significant moments. William looked toward the future with optimism and determination, knowing that his family was ready for whatever responsibilities awaited them. The coronation had been a test that they had passed with flying colors. Their children had shown the world that the monarchy would continue in capable and caring hands for generations to come. The love and support they had received from the public gave them strength and motivation to serve with dedication and humility. As the night grew quiet and London finally began to settle down after its day of celebration, William and Catherine felt grateful for the opportunity to serve their country and proud of the family they had built together. The coronation of King Charles had been a success, but more importantly, it had shown that the values of duty, service, and love that defined our family would continue to guide them through all the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead in their remarkable royal journey.